I can't hear you. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi there, everybody. Listen, I'd like to just be able to do the bare minimum of what's required of me today so I can go back and do my duties here in Sacramento at the hospital. Is that possible? And voting for?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Our first regular agenda item is the decision on the call.
Okay, got it. Great.
We're waiting for Susie to say go.
You done? I'm waiting.
Okay, meeting will come to order.
Recording in progress.
There we go. Roll call. Lars?
Here.
Barbara?
Over.
Here.
Jeff?
Here.
Margie?
Here.
Robert is here. Approval of the minutes from May 9th. Any comment?
No
A
comment.
motion, please.
Yeah, no comment, and I would move to approve those minutes.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 We're going to leave comments from the public on items not on the agenda until later in the meeting so that we can get to item 5A. But does anybody have any statement of conflict of interest to put forward? Not hearing any, we will go to item 5A. Pardon? Okay. The third call. I don't know that we have a specific format for doing this. We have had surveys and input from the public. I emailed you guys with the way I counted it, although it wasn't easy to count. Jeff, what did you come up with?
So I counted all of the comment sheets, and then I also looked over that spreadsheet that Susie had sent along as well. For those of us who saw any of those comment sheets or the spreadsheet, you probably noticed that some public members actually voted.
Yes.
They made it pretty clear what their favorites were, or their 1, 2, and 3, etc. Whereas others commented on all three, and a number of people thought all three of them were really strong, which I have to say was a very real stamp of approval for me, and I feel for the PAC. I think we did an admirable job narrowing it down to those three. Anyway, I came up with 66 for Bruce Johnson's piece, 67 for Diego Harris's piece, and 27 for Michael Lindell's piece.
Yeah, and that's about what I got. So I think it's a statistical tie in public opinion between the Bruce Johnson piece and the Diego Harris piece, and the Michael Lindell piece trailing quite a ways behind. Nonetheless, to make it clear for the recording and for anybody else who's watching, the decision is...
I can't hear him anymore. I was doing the volume.
Oh.
The decision is up to the Public Arts Committee to recommend the final choice to the City Council, who has the final approval of the commission. So should we start with comments or a straw vote?
Comments.
Okay. Who would like to make a comment?
Barbara?
I am going to vote in favor of Diego Harris for a number of reasons. I really appreciate his presentation when he joined us that day. I really like that he's using all those recycled things, including those boiler drums or whatever they are from his father's home. I just thought the whole thing was appealing, and I think that especially with the next generation behind us, they're going to appreciate the use of those materials. And I thought aesthetically they were just very imaginative. There's somebody playing the piano in the hospital lobby of all things.
Okay. Lars?
I guess overall, I think the choice is very difficult. I think all very, very strong pieces. I think the scale of Diego's piece, the height of it is its best feature in a sense, a reason to vote for it, like just a very dramatic, tall piece. I thought Bruce Johnson's piece has, to me, the most intricacy of material and variety. I thought that's its strong point, and also the fact that I guess kids can climb on it, or it is to be touched. I think that's a great point in its favor. I think Michael's was such a wonderful concept and interpretation of the landscape of Sonoma County. So those are sort of the first impression, in a sense, or first reasons I would vote for each of those. And I like them all very much. So I think I'm just going to, I don't know that we're voting yet, or you'd like to hear my choice. Those are my comments at this, at least first round of comments on all of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeff?
Is my microphone working?
I can hear you.
Apparently
Is this microphone working? Thank you.
not. Okay.
Yeah, I also found this to be a pretty difficult decision, and I'm actually still kind of waffling a little bit between these two pieces, but I live on the south side of Sebastopol, so I actually make a trip past this site a lot. I actually stopped on the way over to this meeting and parked across the street and just looked at the site, considering these two pieces in particular. And for me, it also comes down to the fact that majority of the viewers are in vehicles. And if you've ever traveled that section over there, you know that that stretch often backs up. So when you're in the car, you're going to be looking over there. I think a lot of the drivers will probably notice the piece sitting over there. I appreciate comments from a number of people who use that trail, referring to things like the fluidity of a piece. Some people referred to the spiral nature. People were pretty half and half, I thought, in terms of what they thought really represented the site being a trailhead, representing the fluidity of cycling and walking the trail. A lot of people also felt it was a very meditative site and felt like Bruce's piece was a more meditative piece. A lot of people commented on Diego's piece being lyrical. I must have read the word lyrical, I don't know, maybe almost 10 times in their comments. So I thought that was pretty interesting. For me, it comes down to, I think, the visibility, because for me, I could live with either one of these two top favored pieces. But I see Bruce's piece as being more 360 degree, and Diego's being more two-sided. Diego's being larger and more prominent than Bruce's. I did appreciate some comments from the public about Diego's piece maybe being more effective with some kind of a flatter background, which made some sense to me. And there were a lot of comments about spider webs, which kind of tickled me, but made a lot of sense, really, when I thought about it some more, how spider webs will really collect on some of these pieces, some of them more than others, and could either look better or maybe not look so good. So I'll stop there.
Margie?
Thank you, everyone. I think I respect and appreciate the work of Bruce Johnson, but I feel that of his pieces, this is not one I would like to choose And I am concerned about its viability in that spot in terms of the wood and the possible fires. Diego's piece for me is very strong, clear. The materials are lasting. It's a piece that is very beautiful and it has a sense of movement to it. And in terms of going by the spot, I think it would be easiest just to see clearly. I think that Bruce's piece would kind of blend in more and not be as visible. And I also want to put a personal word in terms of the spiral design of Diego's piece. I've mentioned this before, but I have a real strong feeling about spirals. And I've spent over 50 years teaching people functional anatomy and physiology. And our bodies inhabit spirals. We're structurally spiral. We functionally are spiral. And our muscles, the way the proteins move across for the elasticity of the muscles, when the egg and the sperm meet, they spiral. And you can see the spirals in the celestial world, and as above, so below in plants and animals. And to me, that's very meaningful. And so personally, this piece, if it was chosen to have there, it would have personal meaning and validity to me as a member of long member of the pack. So, and I think that there were elements of that in what the public was saying as well. Thank you.
Well, I love them both, and I would be delighted for either of them to be there. Personally, Bruce's work has always appealed to me, as Jeff said, for its sort of meditative nature, and I particularly respond to the materials, but the deciding thing for me is that there will not be any more Bruce Johnson pieces, and we do have another sculpture site. And when there is funding, if we choose Bruce's piece, I would hope that Diego would resubmit his piece when we do the North Entry piece after we get funded again by something. So, but I would be happy in either case.
Can I make a comment on that response to what you just said?
No, that's my opinion. I don't want
Mhm.
your opinion about my opinion.
Well, about what you said, that
If that triggers something for you, go ahead.
okay. One of the things I was thinking about Bruce's piece is that there are others, that he is not creating more, but there are others, and that I would hope at some point, and I would think because the family is so interested, that the pieces are on loan, or the art center might borrow a piece, or that I think Sebastopol eventually would have one.
Could be. You don't like that particular piece. I particularly do like that piece,
Okay.
as it's so representative of the themes of his work. I guess at this point, everybody should pick one and say what it is, and we'll see how that falls out. Yeah?
Sure. We
Please.
need to open it up for public comment before we
yes.
get into that.
Is there any public comment on the topic at hand?
So we will go into the room first. I'm not seeing anybody in the room, and then we'll go out to Zoom to see if there's anybody that would like to provide public comment.
Right. Well, the two artists and two members of this committee are those
Okay.
who are on Zoom.
Then I'm not seeing anybody.
I'm
so
not
you
seeing
can
anybody on Zoom.
Close public comment for this item.
Does anybody present wish to say anything? Okay. back to where we were. Pick one, Barbara. Did we lose her?
It looks like she's there, but we will
She
need.
was, oh, Barbara, you're on mute if you were answering.
So we will need a formal motion for the art piece that you do choose, and then we'll do a vote.
I understand.
Okay,
I just want to hear where we are, and
Okay.
then we will do a motion about that one.
perfect.
Okay, I'm not getting Barbara, although she was very clear.
Mhm.
Lars?
One other thing I was thinking of was this is our third commission, and what might be the best piece sort of to go with 1 and 2. And for that reason, among others, I think Bruce Johnson's piece is my selection. I think it's just the variety of the materiality compared to the Ned Kahn and Michael McGinnis have more of a singularity in their materials. I think to me that's another reason among many reasons that I like that piece. So that would be my preference.
Barbara, are you here to,
Yes, can you hear me now?
yes?
Okay, good. So I am voting for Diego Harris's piece.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Jeff?
you all. Wonderful comments.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think for me, ideal, I'd love to see Bruce Johnson's piece in a site that is more 360 degree. However, after reading over all the public comments and being the at-large member of the PAC, I'm really taking to heart a lot of the comments that the public made. I really love that so many kids responded. There are a lot of positive comments about the climbability of Bruce Johnson's piece. And I see that as an important thing. So I'm going to recommend Bruce Johnson's piece.
Margie?
I would vote for Diego's piece.
And mine is for Bruce Johnson's piece. So we seem to be 3-2, and I don't think we should beat ourselves over the head about convincing somebody to change their vote. Unless somebody disagrees with me about that, I would entertain a motion.
So I would move to recommend the number 1 piece would be Bruce Johnson's Cohen, and the number 2 piece, just so the city council knows, would be Diego Harris's piece.
Do we
I'll
have a
second
second?
that. I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor of Bruce Johnson's piece being recommended to the city council for placement at the Joe Rodota Trail, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Oh, Barbara's muted.
Okay. We will recommend Bruce Johnson's piece to the city council.
Barbara,
did
can
Barbara
you-
have a vote?
Yeah, Barbara, can you do your vote, please, so we can capture that?
Yes, I'm abstaining.
Okay, thank you. So that motion passes with 3 ayes, 1 no, and 1 abstention.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Diego, before you go, thank you for a wonderful submission. And what would you like us to do with your materials?
Just hang on to it, and I'll be down there at some point. How long would you be willing to hang on to it for?
Lake County.
I would say by the middle of next week.
Uh,
A week and a half.
Is a week and a half okay? If not, I'll take it home and you can come to my house for it.
I'm going to be in Colorado next week, so I'm preparing for that. I might be able to be there in about a week and a half or 2 weeks.
Okay, I would recommend Robert then, if he's going to be on vacation, that you just take the piece and he come get it from you, if you're
Okay.
okay with that.
Diego, you know how to communicate with me. I will take your stuff home and you
I
can,
think I have your email.
yeah, and you can let me know when you can come down, but I will be out of town from May 29th to June 9th.
Okay, it may be after June 9th then. I'll
That-
be in Colorado for about 5 days. I'm doing 3 different sculpture shows there, so be kind of busy.
Okay, no problem. Thank
Excuse me,
you,
Robert,
Diego.
I'd like to
Thank you.
interrupt you. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Diego. Could I interrupt, please?
Of course.
Is it appropriate for me to leave the meeting?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. This was a great experience. I really appreciate all of our commitment and efforts and everybody at the library and all of the artists. It was pretty amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara, and good luck.
Thanks for joining us, Barbara.
All right, bye-bye.
So as I foresee the process, when would the city council vote on our recommendation?
I believe we have that scheduled for their June 4th meeting.
Okay, so Kendra, June 4th is when the city council will hear this. And after their presumed approval, I will get together with you and we'll figure out some logistics.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all. What a great process. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I make
you,
a
Kendra.
comment before we move on? So first of all, I wanted to appreciate Barbara, Robert, city staff, Sebastopol Library for prepping, setting up, presiding, hosting the finalist presentation. I watched it on Zoom since I was unable to go. Thanks, Izzy. And although I thought it was really necessary and meaningful, I would recommend in the future that we consider how the room is set up, because on Zoom, some of the artists turned and faced in other directions. Their pieces were also not necessarily really present to the camera.
Mhm.
And it was difficult to see some of what they were describing. So that's just my comment on that.
Well, let's hope we have that problem to solve sometime in the future.
You're here.
Yeah, I'd second what Jeff just said, because I also was on Zoom and could not see
Yeah.
a number of things.
And then finally, I wanted to say, there were a number of people who I really appreciated how much they appreciated being included in the commenting process. And a number of people who really appreciated all 3 pieces, and they didn't vote. I mean, they were very favorable and felt very strongly about all 3 pieces.
Okay, so back to item 3, comments from the public on items not on the agenda. Are there any?
Staff did not receive any public comments for items
Thank
on
you,
the agenda.
John. Then we are on 5B. The schedule of the community sculpture garden opening, we have had trouble with that, but if we would like to do it in concert with an opening at the Art Center, and they are happy to do that, would like to do that, the next reasonable opportunity with them is a show called whose theme is Haven. So God knows what anybody's going to submit to that show. But the opening for it is on August 17th. That would be a Saturday, typically from 2 to 4. And we would make an announcement about it at the beginning of that, and then suggest that people come out and meet the artists and so on at 3 or 3:30, something like that. Does that sound reasonable to anybody?
So
It
generally
was
speaking,
August 17th, you said?
3
Yes,
months,
August 17th.
3 months from now,
Yes.
basically.
Or we can do something, without the Art Center's participation. I just like the idea of them drawing an audience in addition to ourselves, so that it is a well-populated event.
I think for me, it's worth waiting for that. I think to connect the sculpture garden and the art center more so, doing it in an opening, just awareness raising all around. I think that's worth waiting for.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Is that something that we should have a motion and a vote on? I would entertain a motion.
Okay.
I'll make
Go
a
for it,
motion
Lars.
to make a motion to have our CSG opening on August 17th.
Okay,
I'll second that.
all right. We are missing a member, but we still have a quorum, so we're
Correct.
okay on this vote.
Yes.
All in favor of August 17th? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. So we
Yes.
have 4 ayes with 1 absent of Barbara.
That is correct. Do we have an update on NedCon?
The only update that Carrie was working on the majority of the NedCon stuff in correlation with Zuzi. The only portion of it that I know of recent is that Ned's contractor is working on getting the proper permits and encroachment permits to get the pad set up. So they're working through that. I believe that's in the Public Works Department because it is an encroachment permit. There was an additional, I think, biological just check off to make sure that they're not disrupting any habitats or anything like that. So once that portion of it is signed off and approved, I believe the encroachment permit will be approved by the city, and then the placement of that can start.
Any ideas about timing?
Thank you.
I don't know how long those take. From my understanding, it's relatively a quick just site visit for them to come out, look at the location, and make sure that nothing's going to be particularly sensitive, and then they give their approval on it. So I'm hoping.
Do we
a
know
few
if
weeks.
Ned is done? That the sculpture is complete and ready to install?
I don't. I haven't reached out to him. I don't know, Zuzi, have you gotten any updates from him?
No, no updates, unfortunately.
Okay. We'll reach out to him tomorrow and see if
Okay.
he can provide us if that sculpture is done. I would hope that since the pads are getting ready to get poured in place, that the sculpture is ready to go by the
We would
time
hope
that.
that.
Yeah. But I know that this has been a long project. So
Okay.
unfortunately, that's the update that I have.
Can you update us by email if that's permissible?
Yes. Yeah. When we receive confirmation back from Ned, and then we can also check with the construction company and send that out to the full pack.
Thank you.
Do we have a planning director's report today?
Yep.
Excuse me, you just skipped.
I
Remember?
did. I know.
Yes.
I was trying to get the fixed things done so that we could have as lengthy a
Okay,
discussion
fine.
on that as
All right. Didn't understand.
as we
what you're
feel
doing.
like.
Thank you.
just trying to manage the meeting.
Yes, it is on the second page. There is a couple items, including the planning department's recommendation on committees kind of reorganization.
Yeah.
Our interim planning director, David Woltering, who's here today, is going to provide that report. And then we can kind of go into the other projects and stuff like that that are happening in town that I can update the pack on. So I don't know if you want to do that now or if you want to stick to the current agenda and go from there.
I was going to let Larry say what he has to say, and so that he doesn't have to stay through a couple of lengthy discussions.
Okay.
If he has other things to do, which I'm going to guess he does because he doesn't normally attend these meetings.
Sure.
And then with everybody's permission, I'd like a 2-minute break because I'm an old man and I need one.
Okay. And then, so Larry's reason for attendance today is in direct correlation with the planning director's report. So if we'd like to go that route, then
Okay.
I would say yes. Or
if
do you
it's
want to
in-
do a break first?
Then 2 minutes.
Okay. So we will take a quick break.
Recording stopped.
How you feeling? Oh, mhm.
Yeah, and it actually yeah, I'm jealous of Larry to go over there in his comfy chair. I think he would stick around if that was.
I don't know, if it's back in sleepy here anytime.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's.
That's true, yeah.
Maybe not.
Where is she in?
Santa Rosa. Anyway.
Yeah, I just, I don't know, medically where you all go, but I know, there's a naturopath in Moses school, too.
Yeah, we dealt with him. I had his kids as a teacher.
Because he, pulled his brothers through, among other people.
Yeah, he was gotten a number of IVs and treatments and
Oh, okay.
supplements through him.
Okay.
We're now dealing with another naturopath out of Canada. He's Dr. Louis Bouchard.
You guys have like a basketball or anything?
We're a
I'm glad to
city
hear that
council
you're
type
connected
meeting
to
and not
Moses.
the.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. My apologies. Have a good day.
Bouchard.
So you're-
Professionally and personally, we've known him for a long time.
Yes, yeah.
So you'll be here as an interim.
It's
until
right.
they
Used to
hire
take
a person?
photographs.
Yes. Is this a thing you do?
Very, yeah.
Yeah, she was doing, she did our school photos
Yes.
2 or 3 years ago. I love them.
What school was it?
Pinecrest.
She did, Credo.
You're like a travel.
And,
I think her kid or son went to Credo.
yeah,
It's interesting. There's a lot of
no, I
professions
think he
that
went,
need that. Ministers,
I'm not sure.
Rabbis.
and
do
I
that.
don't remember what he did, but
School principals and superintendents.
Anyway,
do that.
oh,
People
I'm so
who
sorry. It's so rough.
Just step in and.
I had no idea.
Did you tell Barbara?
Yeah.
I did.
You have been in touch. I just, I know if it happened with us, it would be just.
Yeah, it's devastating.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I volunteered here a lot.
I think it's
Yeah,
time to
Cloud Moss
graduate.
is. Cloud Moss.
No,
Cloud Moss, he's a promoter, producer.
Oh,
He was Cable Festival. He did a lot of concerts here.
Ah,
Before the movie center changed its board.
Okay, you can start recording again.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so John, you and Larry have a coordinated whatever, so go for it.
Sure. So I will introduce again David Woltering, who's our interim planning director, to give the planning department's recommendation on committees reorganization. And this is something that we're doing in relation to city council's action for looking at the boards and commissions of all that we serve, and looking at possible restructuring moving forward to combat the fiscal emergency that we are in. As far as Larry's part, Larry is going to provide some general background on Brown Act requirements and stuff like that, should there be a change from how the PAC is currently operating to what they could be doing in the future. So with that, I'll turn it over to David.
Okay. John, thank you. By way of a brief introduction of myself, I'm David Woltering, and I live in Santa Rosa. I've been a community development director or planning director for a number of Northern California communities over the past many years. I've been in planning for 35 plus years.
Excuse me, can you turn the volume up a bit, please? Thank you.
And locally, I was the planning director for the town of Windsor after incorporation, and then also the city of Cotati. And in 2018, I retired from the city of San Bruno as their community development director, and then was asked to be an interim director, and have been doing that for a number of different communities ever since. Thank you very much. So, for example, Clayton, Healdsburg, Fairfax, Ross, and now here, and I'm happy to be here. And as John mentioned, as you're recruiting for a permanent community development director, I'm stepping in to assist your community and the staff and yourselves during this interim period while you recruit for a permanent director. So I'm happy to be here and happy to assist. John shared with me some information that was gathered from your committee, and then we shared it with the city manager and the assistant city manager and had a discussion. And as I think you're all aware, the city of Sebastopol is looking carefully at its budget, and it's going through a budget review process, looking for opportunities for cost savings and streamlining and process improvements. And as part of that, you provided feedback. John shared that with me. We shared it with the city manager and assistant city manager. And in the brief memo that you have before you, we provide some information in terms of kind of a direction based on your feedback for initial consideration, and we're looking for additional feedback from you today. The highlights, basically, let me give the highlights, and then
Excuse me, we don't see what you're referring to.
it should be in your packet, and it's,
I didn't see that.
do you see it? It's titled Consideration of Boards, Committees, and Commissions Reorganization.
No,
Okay, I can summarize it. Let me,
I think
Yeah, please.
Susie is.
okay. I apologize for that. But as I mentioned, the city is looking at ways to, reduce costs, streamline, and improve processes. And we did receive feedback from your committee, and that's been considered. So the initial recommendation that's going forward from the staff is essentially this. We realize that this is an informal citizens committee, and Larry McLaughlin, the city attorney, is here today to really talk to you about the Brown Act and give you some guidance, as you continue to work together to make sure that you're conforming with state law. So that's the purpose for Larry being here today, and he'll step up in a few minutes and provide an overview and respond to any of your questions on the Brown Act and those matters.
May I just get context here for a second?
Sure.
Reading this briefly,
Yes.
it looks to me like you're accepting the proposal that we made, that we meet quarterly, and other meetings, the Brown Act issue, would be not in this setting, somewhere off
If I could
campus.
go through this, you're correct, but let me
Okay,
briefly
I
and
just
quickly go
wanted
through
to-
this.
to-
You're
to
right.
hear
You're-
the end so we can go back and fill in the middle, and I understand what we're talking about.
Understood, absolutely. But you're correct in terms of just kind of moving forward. The idea really would be to meet less frequently, and I'll go through this very quickly. So the idea really is to look at cost savings. So costs for this committee and other committees and commissions have to do with technology, staff time as examples. So how can we look at reducing costs? So one thought, and again, you shared ideas on this, would be to do Zoom only meetings, in person and Zoom only. So there would still be the Zoom option for people to tune in, but there wouldn't be the live streaming. So they could view and be aware of your sessions, your actions. But the idea really would be, if they want to come and speak, they could certainly submit comments, no question about that, to staff. But if they want to come and engage, they need to come to the meeting.
In my experience with Zoom, there's also a recording option.
And the recording option would be there, and that's you're right, exactly. So not only would there be the Zoom option to view the meeting, it would be recorded, and that would be very important in terms of the public record. So you're right, exactly right. So there would be the recording option as well. And then, as I mentioned, as the chair already said, the idea would be basically to meet on an as-needed basis, less frequently, but basically quarterly, something like that. And then the idea would be to work with the committee to have you essentially, do some research, prepare staff reports, draft agendas, and submit those to staff and the staff would fine tune. And you maybe have been doing some of that already to some extent. So those are the basic ideas, again, after getting your feedback that are kind of settling in with staff and would be the basis for going forward for a city council recommendation. So if you have feedback on those, please let us know today, because what I've written out here is essentially what we would be recommending for this body going forward to city council at this point. And I'd be happy to respond to any questions you have, or John could as well, on this matter. And again, your feedback would be appreciated. And then Larry McLaughlin is here to talk about the Brown Act and respond to any questions, just to make sure that as you go forward, you're really familiar with what you can do, what you shouldn't do, et cetera, and your questions can be answered. Thank you. Yes.
You use the terms as needed and then quarterly. So
Not more frequently than quarterly.
not more frequently. So how is that going to be, got it? Yeah. How is that going to be arranged? Because it's vague.
It is vague, and the idea is to be flexible, and staff would be coordinating with the chair of your body to get kind of a sense of what you're working on, what the interests are, and to develop a schedule. But again, and thank you, Chair, the idea is less frequently, but not more often than quarterly, to be clear. But again, there would be coordination between staff and your chair to just kind of establish an overall schedule. Again, the idea is to look at need. What's the community need, and kind of work around that. It is flexible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When we do meet in this, it would be the same time slot, same place, but only in a month where we needed to have a meeting for city staff to be present because we're voting on something that's important in that way. Am I correct about that? Not more than quarterly, but always in this time slot.
I'm assuming that would be correct, but maybe John should respond to that again. Again, this is going to go to the city council, and there may be some reorganization at the council level, but John, if you could, please.
Yeah. So my understanding would be that, yes, the time slot would likely stay the same. The location would stay the same, because the youth annex building is our current location for city meetings. So that's where we would have those. The only other coordination that we would have to work out, and obviously having enough time in between meetings would help, but coordinating with the community center to make sure that the youth annex building is available in that time slot, so that we can have that meeting. If we need to adjust those dates, then we do so accordingly. I think on the quarterly basis, it's a lot easier to be flexible with those meeting dates, and to make sure that all members can attend, and we have a full quorum and stuff like that. I know that this group had some difficulties in the past, kind of selecting a day and time. So hopefully we can accomplish that. And if we need to have it in another location, we can try to work to, accommodate that as well.
Well, what I believe we were thinking when we made this recommendation is that we would probably still meet monthly, but we would be meeting bearing in mind what we can't talk about under the Brown Act, to discuss things to do with the CSG, and when somebody wants to propose art to the city, another one of our functions, those kinds of things. And that we would be meeting then without city staff, probably in the fireside room at the Art Center, which they are kind enough to always put at our disposal. And, paying attention to the rules. Does that meet what you guys think?
I think on that, it would be very important, given what we're talking about going forward, for the city attorney to advise you on that, because there does seem to be some informality in terms of your meetings as you move forward. And I think that Larry McLaughlin should provide some guidance to you, so you're all clear as to what you can and shouldn't do.
I think that
Larry?
maybe was my cue to come up. I didn't really have anything prepared today. I was going to watch where the conversation and ideas were going. So my comment so far would be that it is difficult, not impossible, but difficult to have Brown Act compliant meetings on an informal basis, kind of in between the quarterly meetings I'm hearing about, because the Brown Act has a number of requirements, including posting of agendas, providing for public comments, providing for public access, basically all the formalities. There's not that many of them, but the formalities that you go through right now, for instance, today, if you were meeting what you call informally in between these quarterly meetings, there'd have to be some way found to comply with the Brown Act in the meantime to meet those requirements. So the only other option I could think of that would make it potentially somewhat possible without all those formalities might be some sort of a committee system. It is possible to have a committee formed that's a committee of this committee. Less than a quorum of your body could form a committee to do specific things. There's no requirement of having, as long as it's less than a quorum, there's no requirement of being open to the public or observing those formalities. For instance, if you are going to review projects or some kind of defined task that's less than a full-fledged public art committee meeting, you could do that through a committee system.
Okay, well, I mean, as we envisioned it, that doesn't help, because less than a quorum is 2,
Well,
and we are 5.
so yes, well, it'd have to be a committee of 2.
So in terms of the requirements that you mentioned, and let's be clear if we can, exactly what those are and how we could meet them. So for instance, if we are meeting in the fireside room, public certainly could attend.
And it could be posted.
It could be posted. And if we don't want to take staff time, there might be a way for us to use our website to post the meetings and for that to be taken up in some ways, a minimal involvement in staff. So I think that if we can be clear about what the absolute requirements are, it may be possible to go forward in the way that Robert has been suggesting.
It is actually possible. So when I met with the Climate Action Committee, and there was some discussion along those lines, kind of a self-help situation. I'm not advocating for this or recommending it, but I'm just saying it is theoretically possible to meet the requirements of the Brown Act, and basically you could theoretically produce your own meeting, so to speak, and do the postings and all those types of things. There's not that many requirements in actuality for the Brown Act. Preparation of an agenda, posting it in various places, providing for public comment. It's not required, but you would normally take minutes and so forth. So some of those things, you could theoretically do them on your own in between the more formal meetings that are quarterly.
Well, those
Again,
sound
I'm
not
not
too,
advocating for that, but it is theoretically possible.
those sound not too hard. Zoom is that, I mean, the Brown Act was written before there was Zoom, so I presume it's not in there.
Zoom is not a requirement, obviously, of the Brown Act. Zoom is to assist the public in being able to attend meetings where it's otherwise not convenient for them. And then I also would mention, it's a little unclear to me what was being thought of here in the quarterly meetings, because there's different levels of Zoom, obviously. I forget what they call it, a seminar kind of format where there's no interaction with the public. That is theoretically possible, where they can observe on Zoom but not participate. And in that situation, they'd have to be in person at the meeting to participate. Then there's the full Zoom, where like the city council meetings, and here now, where people can participate by Zoom. None of those are a requirement of the Brown Act. It is simply a matter of overall policy set by the city council, which is the decision-making body overall for how all these committees operate. obviously, and the desire of the committee and the people that are participating, how much interaction you feel is necessary for the public. So all those things are theoretically possible, and if you use your imagination, you can think of a number of ways to handle these meetings, all of which would comply with the Brown Act. Yes, because the Brown Act was written pre-Zoom, and it's not that difficult to comply with as just as an objective matter. Whether it's permissible with the city council or the best idea, that's for others to decide.
As I've understood you, the primary thing about such a meeting is that we post the agenda in advance according to the timeline that the Brown Act states.
Yes.
Is there really anything else?
Well, you have to provide, there's requirements during the meeting. You have to provide for public comments and so forth.
Sure, right.
So, and that could be limited to the public being here.
Yes, we would do that.
The other requirements go with posting of agendas, staff reports. Not all of those are found in the Brown Act, but they just kind of go with the territory, because you have an agenda, you're going to have staff reports, and you're going to prepare minutes of the meeting itself.
Well, I'm going to presume at those casual meetings that there would not be a staff report, and staff can simply say they have no report.
There's no requirement of a staff report.
Chair Brent, if I could, and Larry, if I could just interject here, I think it would be helpful to get an understanding from the committee what your intent would be between formal meetings in terms of your work. So it sounds to me like there would be kind of working sessions. I'll refer to them as working sessions, and you can go into more detail. It sounds to me like for those more formal, infrequent meetings where staff would be in support with Zoom and recording, et cetera, there would be agenda setting. So kind of your working meetings, your agenda meetings, and if there's anything else you could kind of describe for us, in particular for Larry, so that we can give you guidance in terms of how that might be possible.
Well, our responsibilities, the CSG and maintenance of it, whether we need to contact an artist, there's a problem with a piece, all of the pieces that are in the CSG are on 2-year renewable agreements. So we have to decide when we're going to want to replace a piece. And we need to put out a call for submissions to the CSG when there are either pieces taken away or we ask the piece to be taken away, whatever. So the maintenance of the CSG and all the things that go along with that are the most common topic for us when we're not doing what we did today with a major sculpture. And the other thing that comes up is that people want to do art in the city, or they want to donate art to the city, or they want to propose something.
Mm-hmm.
And so the mandate is for them to come to the PAC and tell us what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we chat about that. And in the context that we're talking about now, I presume that we would talk about it, but we would not vote. We would make sure that we had one of these meetings and put any votes off until that meeting when there was the full deal, and vote on the things that we know we're saving up for votes.
So it sounds to me like, in many cases, people, in terms of organizing or reorganizing, try to guide people into certain meetings. So for example, in this case, let's say you met quarterly in a setting like this where the staff is really, there to support you and the community in terms of Zoom, recording, location, ADA accessibility, and on and on and on. Would it be possible, and maybe it's preferred, I'll just say, to kind of guide your work and public input into these quarterly meetings so that, you have the support to do your work. There's no issue in terms of Brown Act compliance. There's accessibility, there's staff support, and on and on and on. Is that a possibility?
Let me be sure that I understand
Sure.
what you're suggesting, which is that we simply change from 12 meetings a year to 4.
Yes.
But
And
I have a-
and not
can
meet
I-
in between.
why
Can I
would we
make
want
a
to do that?
comment or? I think if we ever get we have money coming in for another commission,
Exactly.
I think the schedule is very important, right? It already takes us a long time to get from point A to point Z and get a sculpture approved and installed. So if we only meet 4 times a month and we have a new commission, it's going to be like 3 years or 5 years before that process runs. That goes through all the way it needs to. So I think the informal meetings there's a lot of homework or legwork that has to be done that's not as formal or official that could be done between a quarterly meeting, it seems to me, to keep a process moving forward.
And
I have a
also-
comment too, but Larry,
I just want to make a suggestion along those lines. You can still have a Brown Act compliant meeting that's essentially a study session. So,
Yeah.
Mhm.
city councils meet in study sessions and they'll study 1 or 2 things. They won't hold a full-fledged city council meeting. Now, they still have to comply with the Brown Act. So there would be an agenda, and it says essentially something like study session to study whatever. So you could do that theoretically in between your quarterly meetings. You'd still be having official meetings of the committee,
Right.
but the agenda requirements would be simpler and the setting would be more informal. So that's
That's what we're
possible under the
talking
Brown
about.
Act.
And I just want to add that in addition to what Lars brought up, which I think is very important, we don't know. Something else may come up with art projects for the city. We don't know timing. There may be some element of timing that would preclude, would necessitate it doing before a quarterly meeting.
Mhm.
And we cannot predict the future. And so I think having the ability and the practice of meeting monthly would be better. And also, there may be resurfacing of funds, as Lars said. And my other question after that would be the possibility of the resuscitation of the regular monthly meetings of the committee if funding changes in the environment.
If I could comment on that, I think we're looking at the situation now in terms of the current budget and trying to work with the manager, assistant city manager, and city council. As conditions would change, there could be changes made to how often you meet and how much support you receive. But right now, we're looking at this coming fiscal year and more the near midterm. And in that context, we're coming to you and making these recommendations. I think that the city attorney has suggested maybe some middle ground here aligned with your thoughts of maybe the quarterly meeting and maybe, I'm going to assume about a quarterly meeting, and then maybe as needed, maybe the study session format, and we could meet with the city attorney and city manager further on that concept to kind of figure it out. I'd be a little concerned, I think you're hearing this from me, in terms of what the city attorney has mentioned in terms of Brown Act compliance. I think it puts a lot of responsibility on you as a citizens committee to comply. And to the extent that we can find middle ground so that the city staff can support you and still acknowledge budget constraints, I'll just be candid, so that you're on safe ground, we're addressing budget issues. As conditions may improve in the future, then there could be, reassessing and talking further about number of meetings and staff and technology supports. But I think what we need to do is to kind of focus on this budget and in the near and midterm and be in a position to make recommendations to our manager and council that really address the current circumstance.
Well, I understand what you're saying from our side of the table. I think we would like to leave on our calendars our meeting schedule, and two of them would be study sessions or not happen, depending on whether there was anything to talk about, which there might not be. And as the current chair, I'm perfectly ready to accept the responsibility to avoid the meeting if we don't have to have it. But if there's things for us to talk about, then we would call it a study session, as Larry suggested, and we would not vote on anything, and we can learn to be good under the Brown Act.
I think, and there's a good, I think, a point to be made that the public is almost never at our meetings. So the Brown Act, we also, of course, I'm not going to be flippant about the Brown Act, but there are oftentimes, right? How many times in our 12 meetings a year does somebody come to a meeting? It's really only when we have a call or we have something like that. So I don't know that it would be a big struggle to comply in a minimal way with the Brown Act.
I have a comment and a few questions, if I may. Another concrete example that is one of the mandates, so to speak, for the PAC is to steer and make decisions towards the 4 entry sites into the city and out of the city, and to find sculptures. So we are finishing up the 3rd one. So there's a lot of legwork, so to speak, that could be done towards looking at considering that 4th site, much of which doesn't necessarily need a motion or doesn't necessarily need a vote. I'm just providing that as an example, since you did ask about what the city might need to know. My questions are around, I would assume that if we did have any of these study sessions and if the city required us to share those reports, that we would be provided with templates of the necessary stationery, et cetera. I'm also curious if you wouldn't mind sharing, at this point, what is being considered as the expected maximum/minimum frequency of meetings for other city committees? Does anyone have any idea at this point?
So the Public Arts Committee we have the recommendation of quarterly. That would be also the same for the Climate Action Committee. They meet on a monthly basis as well, which is right after this meeting. So that's our recommendation for that group. For the Design Review Board and Planning Commission boards, we're actually looking at a possible combination of those two to help streamline that process. Currently, right now, a project that triggers the review of Planning Commission, City Council, and Design Review Board goes in that order as the project goes through its entitlements. We have run into some situations where the Design Review Board gets to a project that has already been approved by Planning Commission and City Council, and they are kind of hamstrung as far as conditions and project requirements that they can impose on that project. So we're looking at restructuring it in a way that moves the design review portion of it towards the front half, where those changes and considerations are less burdensome for the applicant, because at that point, when a project gets to Design Review Board, it's essentially already been somewhat completed as far as design, functionality, locations of certain things and stuff like that. So that would be the recommendation for them, is they would still meet twice a month, but their meetings would likely get a little bit longer because you're combining two separate bodies into one. We're also looking at some other cities and towns in the county who have a kind of similar operation for those two boards.
the terms Citizens Committee and the City Committee, I don't think those are the same thing. And our understanding was, and our desire was that we would continue as a city committee rather than as a citizens committee. And I'd like to have clarification.
I mean, it sounds like that's what you're talking
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
they use the term, I think you did, citizens committee, which we did not think that was where we were going.
I'll start off first.
So the Public Arts Committee is a little bit different than the Climate Action Committee in regards to the Public Arts Committee handles funds that the city takes in and applies it to a certain project. So it would be a little bit more difficult to have this committee, I believe, as a full-fledged citizens committee because you are handling funds that the city takes in. The Climate Action Committee would be one that would be a little bit easier to convert to a citizens committee because their committee creation was by a resolution. The Public Arts Committee was by an ordinance. So there's an ordinance in the city code that creates this group. It would be a little bit more difficult to modify and change. Or
So you're saying that the PAC would continue as a city committee?
correct.
Okay, and then I just want to have a comment about the meetings, the working sessions meetings in between the quarterly ones.
right.
And what Robert was talking about, whether it was needed to be met or not. And in my experience, and I've been on the committee pretty much since its began in 2012, there were periods when there were no meetings. And that we were told there were no meetings. However, because there was a schedule meeting, we were all responsible to be available. And if things become vague or as needed or, so-called flexible, I'm just concerned that there be clarity in terms of availability so that when the committee needs to meet, well, because it's not clear or it hasn't been meeting or there's no precision that people say, oh, gee, guess I'm not available.
If I could, a thought on that. Again, I think in terms of the formal meetings, more formal meetings, I'll use that term, the idea would be quarterly.
Yes,
Right.
but I'm
I
talking
think
about
we're
the
all
other ones.
in agreement on that. And then where we're discussing, I think, is the idea, given the work before you, the fourth entry and other work that you do, your mission, your mandate, the need to, meet in between. And so the city attorney had discussed the option perhaps of a study session, which may work well in terms of addressing that. We're wanting to make sure that we support you in terms of Brown Act compliance. We just want to make sure that there are no issues there. And then we're also hearing about predictability in terms of meetings. Seems like if there would be those more quarterly meetings that would be supported by staff and technology, and then there would be the study sessions in between. That's kind of where we're headed generally, I think, from this discussion is what I'm hearing. And then the question becomes, how are we going to determine when those study sessions might be needed based on workload and public input, et cetera, is something that's...
Well, when you say we, I think that's we and not you, we.
Well, I'm not saying that it is us. I'm saying we, in terms of making that decision. I don't disagree with what you're saying. So
Right.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
So I think that's up to the chair to look at what's, agenda items there are and tell everybody a week ahead whether we're going to have the meeting or not by posting the agenda or not posting it.
If I could just
Yes,
make a
please.
comment for a second. So the Brown Act distinguishes between regular meetings and special meetings. So oftentimes, if you're going to have a study session, it becomes a special meeting. That's one that's not regularly scheduled. If you were on a quarterly system, you'd be regularly scheduled for quarterly meetings, and the public would know in advance when those are.
Okay.
If you determine, and you could cede that to the chair, to determine the need for a special meeting. I'll quit calling it a study session. That's what it could be, or something different.
Okay.
But it's a special meeting, and you schedule those as you need them.
And we have done that, and we could, tend to always have our special meetings at a time and place that we're pretty much aware of. But, when we had a field trip, that was a special meeting.
Okay, my understanding has been that, and Carrie would say, that we can't have a regular special meetings, regularly occurring special meetings. We could have them occasionally.
That's true. I mean, a special meeting is what the word implies. You have regular meetings that are regularly scheduled, and the third Thursday or whatever it is, and the public knows when those are going to be generally. Special meetings are as needed, and they can be called by the chair, for example.
Well, that is a bit of a conundrum in terms of, if we have to do them all as special meetings and they can't be at a regular time,
Or then you
then
could have,
organizing the five of us to be able to all get together at the same time becomes a challenge.
well, then you could create you're
Study
maybe not
sessions.
talking about quarterly any longer, but you'd have a series of regular meetings.
Well, okay, we are struggling to find a terminology and solution to this. Is the word study session off the table now? Is that?
I just use that to describe what are common amongst city councils, for example. Want to study one or two specific subjects, you often have a study session about them, and they're much more informal, and they don't have as much structure. They don't have as many Brown Act requirements.
But it's the
I'm
schedule
talking
of
really
those
between special meetings and regular meetings.
Chair, if I
Study
could,
sessions, can study sessions be at a regular schedule? That's my question.
Yeah.
We're having a problem about regular schedule.
Kind of,
The regular schedule is quarterly.
No,
Regular
no.
schedule is quarterly, and then when we have other meetings that have to be less regular. So what it sounds like, we can still find time to do it, but it sounds like we can't do it as a regularly scheduled meeting.
Well,
I think that's still a workable solution.
It's a very different perspective. So if quarterly, yes, a regular schedule, but we were initially talking about in between the quarterlies, we would have regularly scheduled study
Okay.
sessions.
I would not.
And that we can't do.
we cannot do that.
We finally come to the bottom
Cannot do
line.
that?
We
Cannot
can't
do that. Let me put out another thought on this, just given what I'm hearing. We suggested quarterly meetings, less frequent, not more frequently than quarterly. I'm hearing from the committee that given your work, that you feel you need to meet more often.
Then quarterly?
Yes,
Yes.
correct? I'm hearing
Yeah,
that.
at the next
Okay.
meeting, we're going to have to figure out what to do on August 17th.
Understood. So bear with me a little
I
bit.
was just
on
giving
this.
you an example.
Good.
So we've talked about special meetings, study sessions, Brown Act, predictability, flexibility, all these different things. It seems like your workload is necessitating, you believe, more regular meetings than quarterly. I'm gathering. I have concerns about satisfying Brown Act requirements, even though, Chair, you're willing to take those on. I understand that. I appreciate and respect that, but I think there are complicating factors to that. Let me put out there for discussion. And again, this is something we'd have to run by the city manager. But if, let's say, instead of monthly, what about every other month? Would every other month regular meetings, would that get you to a point where you would have, say, staff and technology support meet frequently enough with predictability to do your work? And we don't have to worry about the study sessions, the special hearings or special meetings, but just have predictability. Would that be moving in the right direction?
I think so, but let me ask a question in there.
Sure.
We can do a lot by email, but we don't know when group email crosses a Brown Act problem. So can you address that?
Yes, I can. So if you're working towards a consensus, or arguably working towards a consensus in your emailing with each other or phoning even, then you're potentially violating the Brown Act because you're not doing that in public at a regularly scheduled meeting. So the major exception to that is okay is trying to schedule something. So if it's literally just trying to schedule something, those kinds of emails don't violate the Brown Act. If you're arguably trying to reach a consensus, or somebody could construe it that way, then you're in dangerous territory in emailing each other about that.
Okay, so what we're trying to do here is reach a mutual accommodation.
Mhm.
We need to meet less frequently in order to meet the city's financial requirements. And 6 times a year instead of 4 is a step for the city council to be willing to do to accommodate what we feel is our workload.
Mhm.
We get to have consensus because we're in a meeting. What does everybody think about that as a solution to this issue? And we can still have special meetings if there's really something special, and we would schedule it.
I appreciate you putting that offer on the table, first of all. I think that's something we could do, personally.
I think we could.
Would it be feasible in terms of the finances, the budget, and the city council's agreement?
As I mentioned, this is something that we discussed with our city manager, and we brought to you a recommendation that we reviewed with our assistant city manager and city manager. So I put that on the table for discussion, but we would clearly need to bring that back to the city manager. The budget discussion is ongoing. He and his team are looking at ways to try to address a budget gap, understandably. But I think we heard from you that the 4 meetings, regular meetings per year, would be challenging for you to meet the needs of your mission, your mandate. And I'm also hearing the special meetings, study sessions, et cetera, are complicated in terms of Brown Act compliance. So I'm trying to find middle ground here. I'm suggesting that the every other month might be middle ground with the Zoom and staff support, and that we would bring that back to the city manager for presentation and discussion.
Yeah. Lars, you have a comment on that?
I have to leave, actually.
Do you think we can get by with 6 meetings a year?
6 meetings a year, and then the flexibility to add special ones. Yes, I think that's a great solution. But I do have to leave, so thank you. I know there's no vote coming or anything, right? So
There's not.
you can wrap up the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Lars.
So I think that would be good to have the 6. I think that, so we agree on that as a good plan A, but then we need to also just consider plan B in case the city manager and or the council does not agree with the plan A for financial or other reasons. And I just want to say that my perspective in listening is that it's not the Brown Act that's so much a concern in terms of fulfilling the requirements on other the meetings in between, but that scheduling it regularly is not okay. So maybe that's part of the Brown Act. I don't know.
Well, right. I think that if council comes back and says, 4 is all you get, then we will figure on having probably one special meeting in between each of those 4, and it will not be on a regular schedule. And we'll figure out what and when and what we need to talk about, and we'll pay attention to the Brown Act.
We also can work on with subcommittees.
We
when
can.
necessary,
I mean,
right?
and we do that, but I mean,
Yeah, I know.
subcommittee of 2 is
Yeah.
like you
Yeah,
two
yeah.
guys plan the August 17th event. That's a committee, but
Right.
I have another topic I wanted to share that maybe one or more of you can shed some light on. One or more of our PAC members have brought up, since the budget trimming has come up, the possibility of doing some fundraising
Yes.
to raise funds so that maybe we could continue to proceed with some of these artwork acquisitions, et cetera. Does city or city staff have advising on fundraising? Are there particular ramifications or boundaries that the city would need to provide to a committee in terms of fundraising or a subcommittee?
I asked Don that, and he said he would get back to us. And I'm wondering if either of you have any further.
I don't have any further information on that, but why don't I talk to the city manager about that, and we can get back to you if you want to, and we will. And if you have, more information on what you have in mind, though, it seems like you're asking just fundraising in general. How does that apply to your committee? But do you have specific examples or ideas in mind?
There's been a few things discussed, but nothing concrete yet. So
Well,
that's
I
something.
do.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a real financial problem in this committee, I think, and I'm just rattling numbers in my head, but I think by the time that sculpture is installed, and we may need some city services time with a tractor to level the site and grade things and stuff like that, I think we're damn near at zero. The CSG, we have a commitment, which we could abandon, but we pay each artist $250 to offset their cost of moving the sculpture there and loaning it to us for 2 years. And it's supposed to be a changing sculpture garden. And that's part of the attraction of it, so that, people want to go and see it because they don't know what might have changed. So in order to support that, I'm not talking about raising money for the next major commission, but just to keep us going as a committee so that we can do what we've been asked to do, which is maintain the CSG as a viable sculpture walk as part of a city park. And we can't ask the city council for even $2,000 a year to accomplish that. So we need to figure out how to do our job.
So I'll take your questions and information back to our city manager, and our staff will get back to you on this matter of fundraising. But I think I'm hearing a consensus supporting the idea of 6 regular meetings every other month, correct? And the idea would be that there would be, staff support, technology support, Zoom only with recording, no live streaming. And that's kind of what we're hearing. You would, as I indicated in this memo, you would provide support in terms of helping to set agendas and staff reports and things like that as well, basically as outlined here. The change really is, 6 rather than 4.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay, great.
And
Thank you.
We do have ideas about fundraising, but I think the principle is more important to hear back on rather
Okay.
than any specific ideas.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
You
Thank
good,
you.
Larry?
Thank you.
done.
Okay.
Thank you both.
That's really my next meeting.
Yeah.
So that's a good segue into,
Yes, it is.
yes, shall I see, make a
So-
comment on that?
Talking about the CSG, we have had brief discussion and want to have a more thorough one now about, and I want to, about whether any of those might be permanent and under what circumstances and how permanent is permanent. And I want to point out that there are only 3 of us here, and I know this is important to you, and I don't know whether we can come to a conclusion about anything. We can certainly discuss it, but we're missing 2 voices. And I want to confirm with you, Margie, do you still intend this to be your last meeting?
So that is part of the issue.
It is.
I was
because
asked.
I would put this
Yes.
off.
I would like to have some discussion today. And I have been asked if I would come in June. And part of it was like, is it important? Is it necessary? I know that because we wouldn't have, we would only have 4 people if I don't come.
Right. And I'm
and-
not sure we're going to have a meeting in June.
Why?
We are.
No,
We're
this is
committed to
as
that
of
one.
July, yeah.
Oh, this is after July. when the
Correct.
new fiscal
Yes,
year
After
the
starts.
fiscal
July.
year ends June 30th.
Okay.
So we
Right.
would have one final meeting
In June.
under these current circumstances.
So there is no July regular meeting then.
July, we're not,
We might
it's
not.
up in the air.
I see.
So,
All right. So then.
don't know what the
It
future
might
is.
be 3 months after the June one.
We
could have
one June 30th, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. I won't be here. I'm going to be out of town. Anyway, so it sounds like, I'm willing to come in June if we think it's useful.
Well, this is an important
It is important, so I
to
guess I will.
you. And
Yes.
so if you
Right.
want to have your voice in this.
Yeah, okay. But I would
Then-
like to start the discussion today rather than,
Okay, so
So
we're
I'll-
not going to praise you today.
okay, very good. Okay, so I will come in June. But I do want to kind of lay the groundwork for our
I'm
discussion.
sorry,
Yes,
just
yes,
one last point, which just came up.
yes.
When we change formats with the city council, is there any change in how they wish to approach filling empty seats on this committee? Because it has been the
Thank you.
city council that interviewed, and that takes their time. So it's part of the conversation that you
Mhm,
guys need to have with the city manager and or the city council,
Mhm.
because we would like to know what the format is going to be, because we will have an empty seat.
I think, again, that's something that we'll discuss with our city manager and he'll discuss with council.
I just
but
wanted to put it in your head that that
Thank
needs
you.
to be part of the
we
conversation.
will. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's pressing. Thank you.
They publish it in the city newsletter for some period of time, and people apply, and then
Correct.
Well,
everybody who
maybe there's a way
applies
to
gets
adapt so
interviewed.
it doesn't cost as much in terms of staff time, but we do need to get another member.
So, I mean, I suppose they could ask us to choose our own next member, or they can continue to spend their time to do it. I don't know what other method.
Well, we could,
There
we
is.
could, as we do with the sculpture, we could make a recommendation and then they could,
Right,
Mhm.
we could interview and make a recommendation to council
Mhm.
as an alternative to the way it has been done.
Correct. And as you know, ultimately, that's a city council decision to be made.
yes, but you'll be talking with them about that,
Yes, we
right?
will.
Thank you.
Yes, we will.
Okay, onward. So, my idea is because, for a number of reasons, that I think it would be a good idea to have some number of the CSG sculptures to be there on a permanent basis, and I'll explain what I mean by permanent. And financially, it would be advisable. And in terms of the time the committee takes to do things. And my thought is that in one, we could do both, because we could have a certain percentage, like maybe half of the sculptures permanent and half revolving. So that would be fresh and familiar and stable and flowing. And we could put out to the people who are there now that they can apply to be permanent, that their responsibilities would continue over time. So they'd be responsible for maintenance. So then again, we're looking at costs. And that going forward, if there are new pieces that come in, that those pieces also would have the option to apply for permanency. And in terms of what do I mean by permanent? Just long time into the future. Just if you think about the parks in this country that have sculpture, the sculptures are there into the future, and they are permanent. But insurance issues and who is making to not make the city vulnerable, and I think that could be worked out. So I think it would be good to move forward with that. And even when we have the, before we have the opening, to get it clear what we're going to do.
Can I?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm very hesitant to overcommit future committees, the future generations of this committee. I don't disagree with you. We have 12 sculpture bases, somewhere between 4 and 6 of them being permanent. Seems reasonable to me. But how often one can be chosen as permanent and what permanent is are two subjects that, I mean, I think that instead of 2 years and renewing, when we say permanent to an artist, that we might say, would you be willing to sign an agreement with us to leave your sculpture here for 10 years?
I was thinking of the term long-term.
Yeah, long-term rather than permanent.
Okay.
There still could be reasons why we don't want it there anymore. Unrepaired or unrepairable deterioration, various things, but also let's just use that as the concept for a moment. That would suggest then that one sculpture might be made permanent every 2 years. That we would not commit 6 sculpture bases to 10 years because then there's no possibility for whoever's on this committee 4 years from now to have the privilege of doing that. And so if you did it on 10 years and you did one every 2 years, then there could be 5 permanent, and the committee knows that every 2 years it gets to make a decision about that because one of those will age out.
If you have, even if you did it that way, it would still end up with eventually, sometime in the long future, the same situation.
Well, but much less frequency. I mean,
Well, my idea is that for instance, if we said 6 are permanent, if we got 6 that wanted to be permanent, we might not, then over time, one of them might get sold.
well,
And
wait a
therefore,
second.
there'd be another opening, or one of them might
But that's
get
what
broken.
permanent means. They can't sell it.
Ah,
If we say permanent and they say
Okay.
permanent,
yes.
that's
Okay.
it.
Well, in my thinking, and I'm glad you brought that up, my thinking was actually they'd be permanent unless they sold it.
Or
In-
long-term,
Okay, long
if it
term.
were, let's say,
in-
5-year period or maybe a 10-year period.
Yeah, in which
whatever,
case I think long-term
not
is,
saleable during that term.
or it can be for sale, but it's not an unlimited commitment on our part that we call it long-term and we say, would you leave it here for 10 years unless you sell it? In which case you have the first option to replace it with our approval, something like that. Let's say that Robert Smith leaves that marble sculpture on a 10-year basis, but he does sell it. And we say, what else you got? And he shows us something. We say, yeah, that's a cool substitute. Bring it and swap them. Or that one doesn't meet the same criteria that we think we chose the first one on. And so, yes, you may sell it and take it away, and we will put out a call for something else to replace it.
Yeah, I think,
We need to still build in some
yes.
flexibility.
Yeah, I think what we build in is important, and I think what you just described sounds good. 10 years instead of permanent, huh?
Oh, instead of
No,
permanent,
in
right.
permanent, okay, but I wouldn't do less than 10, just in terms of
That's fine.
commitment.
I was going to
But-
say something else that I think you
Yeah.
both alluded to
Yes.
is determining the ones that are long-term on a kind of a rotating basis. In other words, maybe determine 2 the same year for the next 10 years. And then the next year or 2 years later, you determine 2 more. So now you have it's
Right.
out into the future, which is what you were kind of referring to with
Yes.
future PAC members and making decisions
Right.
into the future.
Something so that we know that there will be changes in what's there, but not at the pace we originally set for ourselves, which we clearly realized we couldn't meet. We were going to change them every year, all of them.
Through the chair, a question. So some of the bases would be for rotating, correct? So you would maintain X number that would be rotated on a regular basis?
6
Six.
in
okay.
this suggestion.
And then question, I'm not, familiar with this. In terms of maintenance,
Mhm.
repair and maintenance of the artwork, who's
That's the
responsible?
artist's responsibility in
It's
the
artist's
contract they
responsibility.
sign.
Okay, thank you.
And if it gets broken and they don't want to repair it, then they're responsible to remove it
And we had that happen once.
twice.
Ah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I
You should go see it. And the show at the Art Center.
I just think I would like to see more at once rather than 2, and minimum, let's say, of
So
4.
that's up for discussion for
I
sure.
think
Yeah.
that's unfair to the future
No, I mean,
committee.
you could say that us deciding on the 4 entrances to the city is unfair to future. But the future PAC will have a lot to do on its own. It can have other projects. It's not like the CSG is
That's
the
true.
only thing that anybody on the PAC can come up with. Only, there's other possibilities.
Right? I mean, we're just brainstorming
Yes.
here because without the other 2 members, I don't
Yes.
think that we should make,
No, we're not
decisions
making a
about
decision.
this.
We're discussing, and they can listen.
right.
And I would like to say, as the person who initially conceived of the CSG and waited 6 years for the rest of the committees change enough and think enough to come up with it and agree to it, my initial idea was they were all permanent. And it was a sculpture garden. And that we could add more. And the idea was that the sculpture garden was a place for the non-commissioned sculpture. And because we had so many odd sculptures all over the town, that some of us did not think that highly of, that those artists would have a place to put their sculpture where it would be recognized and appreciated within the context of non-commissioned sculpture. So my idea was initially all permanent. Warren came on as other member of the subcommittee, and his idea was changing every year. And I said, all right, let's just get it moving forward. So at this point, as I'm leaving and also considering the long-term vision for the CSG and the finances and the time it takes, I would strongly recommend that we have, if we have 6 that are permanent, if we got 6 that wanted to be permanent, that still leaves 6 to keep moving. Thank you, sweetie.
I want to address what you just said.
Yes.
I think that if a sculpture is going to be permanent,
Mhm.
this committee needs at least a majority, if not a 80% majority
Mhm.
vote to offer that to a particular sculpture. We would not offer it to everybody.
My idea was that we would put it as an option. They could apply, And just as people
Well,
applied to have a sculpture, we would then decide
And
who
I'm
we
trying
wanted
to
as
avoid
permanent.
rejections.
Okay,
I think that we should
All right.
say that sculpture,
fair enough.
that's got long life to it. Let's ask the artist if they're willing to give us a 10-year commitment for it. There are several sculptures there that I would never make that offer to.
Correct.
And that I hope that we politely say the 2 years has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Please come and get your sculpture, and we're going to offer a new call.
Okay,
Which also,
yes.
the calls are part of the vitalization of this committee. It's what we do, and we want to know what's out there in the community, and we want to constantly upgrade the quality of what's there. And the last ones that we took, I think, did that.
Yes.
And, you know,
I
the
agree
first
with
time
that.
around, we only had what was offered and we took it.
And I want to say, I think it was a really favorable idea in the first place to determine a site for non-commission art. I think that's a really great concept to be able to have that. But I agree with you, at least for the most part, with that, because we may find, and we probably know now in our souls, but the public may also, because we can hear through word of mouth. I mean, you know, living where you do, and the amount of time you spend in the city proper, that the public finds certain pieces a lot more favorable or impressive or permanent in their structure, in their design, et cetera, than another piece might.
We could do the same thing we did at the library and put a little thing out there if we wanted, and
Okay,
say,
it's a lot. Yeah.
if we were going to offer any of these sculptures a permanent place here, which one would you like us
But
to
you
make
just
that
get-
offer
you get
to?
Everybody's opinion. I mean, I
You-
walked through
well,
it with my
yes,
husband.
exactly. You
I
get
walked through it with
every-
my husband, and I said, "Well, what about this one?" He said, "No, you know, I really like that one better." And I thought, I don't particularly. That one's not. I would want in the
Again,
long term.
It's
So
just
it's so-
I was
Yeah, it's up to
brainstorming
discussion
off
for
of
sure.
what Jeff said.
Yeah.
What is the public
But the other
want?
question is, in terms of considering the feelings of the artists, whether someone would feel better if there was only a few people out of the 12 that were invited and the others were not invited, or would they feel better if everyone could apply
And they were
only,
rejected.
and only a few were accepted?
I
Which would they
don't
feel
know.
better? We'd have to decide.
So, Susie, we are supposed to close our meeting now so that you have a break time before the next one. So this is on the agenda. The committee for August 17th is on the agenda.
The Ned Kahn
The opening?
celebration.
Yes.
You know, who's going to do what and what's it going to look like from our side. What else we got?
Well, D is update, organize the Ned Kahn
Well,
celebration. If we find out
Ned Kahn, if
that
there's something to tell us.
it's impending.
Uh-huh.
And another would be if we hear back about any of the
Well,
things
of course,
that-
we're going to have a report from council on what our fate is.
and also about fundraising.
And
Yes.
also, Chair Brent, are you intending to attend the June 4th City Council meeting?
I will be in Canada meeting my new grandson.
Okay.
And as a matter of
I'll
priority,
make
it's
a
kind of
point
like
to-
this.
So are you going to be in town? You're the vice
Would
chair.
you
Yeah,
be
I'll be in
willing to
town.
go to the council meeting and
Yeah,
represent us
I
on
can
Thank
do
that?
you.
that.
And
yeah.
just so I believe that will be just a consent calendar item, so there won't be any formal presentation unless the council decides to remove it from the consent calendar.
Okay.
And typically, those are at the very beginning of the meeting.
So if we see that it's on the consent calendar, you don't need to go.
I would still attend just in case.
Okay.
And like I said, those are usually handled within the first half hour, 45 minutes of the meeting. And then if it's approved, then you can leave. You don't need to be in attendance for the remaining of the meeting unless you absolutely desire to be there.
Got it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Oh,
And
I
at
just-
what time is that start again? please?
Those start at 6 p.m.
And just in the previous discussion, just wanted to throw out the word durability. I mean, it's obvious, but nobody said it in terms of what could be either permanent or 10 years or long-term.
Yeah.
Durability, and
We have
you
to
can-
look at that when we
well, you
invite.
look at those sculptures, you can see which ones have
You certainly
durability.
can.
You certainly can.
Through the chair, a process question, and for John as well. In terms of this recommendation you're developing for handling CSG, as far as the number of permanent and rotating and duration, et cetera, question. Do you, as a committee, develop a recommendation, and then does it go on to the city council that this is what you're recommending in terms of how to process, operate?
Council approves the sculptures that we put forth to them as ones we want to put at the CSG, but so far council has not had anything to say about how long anything is there.
So would you imagine at your next meeting with the full body that you would come together and develop a formal position on this matter?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess we should check with our city manager and city attorney in terms of, with that expectation, would that, recommendation position need to go to city council for action?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can tell us at the next meeting, and
Okay.
we'll.
And you can reassure them that, it would not be different in terms of how it's set up for a liability. It would not be different for long term than it is for shorter term.
Okay.
So we don't want the city to be liable and vulnerable.
Okay.
We wrote a contract which was approved by Larry
Okay.
before we had the artist sign it before the sculpture was placed.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Meeting
Thank
is
you.
adjourned.
Okay.
Recording stopped.
Thank you.
You just
Thanks
can't
for-
leave.
I wanted to. I'm done. But this